Hello and welcome to the Research for Grades 6 through 8 webinar with the Office of Assessment and Standards. My name is Brenna McCormick and I am the Middle Level ELA Education Associate at the State Department of Education within the Office of Assessment and Standards. We'll start with housekeeping. There is a note catcher that you will need throughout this webinar to be fully engaged, and it will serve as your resource landing page. There will be places for you to jot down your thinking, but there will also be hyperlinks for you to access articles, resources, surveys, etc. So please contact me, Brenna McCormick, at bkmccormick@ed.sc.gov for a copy of that note catcher. When you email me, please be sure to include the name of this webinar so I know which note catcher to provide. And as always, we encourage you to use any resources that we share today as a supplement to your high quality instructional materials that have been adopted by your district. Curriculum is determined and selected at the local level, and instruction should be based on student interest and need. So we always want you to consult your HQIM for resources and engagements to support your students' learning. So our purpose today is to understand content and rigor expectations of research for middle school students in order to develop and provide standards-based instruction using high-quality instructional materials and evidence-based strategies. Now, as you can see, this is a pretty educator lingo-filled purpose statement. So I want you to take a moment to deconstruct the statement. What are the verbs? What are the nouns? And in your own words, what do you think we should be able to do when the webinar has concluded today? You'll notice that there is an icon at the bottom right hand of the slide that has the number 1. This indicates where we are on your note catcher. So in box number 1, please take a moment and deconstruct that statement. All right, a little consider this to get our minds focused on the content at hand today. On your note catcher, box 2, you have a link to a research article as well as the profile of the South Carolina graduate and an excerpt from our overarching expectations from our 2024 ELA standards. We would like for you to take a moment to read through each of those documents and then answer the questions that are on your note catcher. And look at our thoughts after looking at these 3 documents. So we know that research can help prepare students for future success. Strong research skills help students analyze information, evaluate sources, and develop their own informed conclusions, which fosters critical thinking. Research skills enable students to identify issues, gather data, and find solutions, which are all essential in academic and professional settings. By mastering research techniques, students develop the ability to independently seek out information and continue learning throughout their careers. Research also supports additional ELA expectations outside of the research strand. Research skills help students gather evidence and details to support their writing, improving their arguments and essays. Research encourages students to evaluate sources and analyze text more deeply, which strengthens their reading comprehension and analysis. And finally, research promotes teamwork and the ability to share findings clearly, which boost students' speaking, listening, and presentation skills. Research can also support other content areas. Research allows students to write in various formats, reports, essays, presentations, across different subjects, which strengthens overall writing skills. Researching in subjects like history or science helps students practice text analysis and evaluating information, which are both key ELA skills. And then research projects require students to synthesize information and present it clearly, which enhances both verbal and written communication in any content area. we're going to hop into our agenda where we're going to give a basic overview of what research is in general. Then we will look a little bit more closely at the middle level expectations from the ELA standards. We'll get into some instructional practices and collaboration, and then clarity and closure. So, as a reminder, there are 4 new strands within the 2024 SCCCR ELA standards. Today, we are obviously focusing on that third strand, research. There are several quotes included on your note catcher on box 3. Take a moment to look through those quotes and then complete the define, describe, defend activity. Based on the quotes provided in your note catcher, how would you define research? Then describe what research should look and sound like in the middle school classroom. Finally, defend. Why is it necessary to teach research skills to middle school students? Right. If you have not looked at the glossary that has been drafted for the 2024 ELA standards, I encourage you to do so. It provides a plethora of very detailed and aligned to our indicator intention definitions. And one of those definitions is the definition of research. So the glossary tells us that the research according to the 2024 SCCCR ELA standards, is the process of investigating and studying sources and materials in order to establish and gather facts, reach new conclusions, and satisfy curiosity. From that definition, what words or phrases draw your attention? Does this definition align with how you defined it on the last slide? Does it align with what you're currently seeing in classrooms in middle schools across South Carolina? On your note catcher in box 4, there's a document linked called the Explanation of Strands document. On the bottom of page 18 of that document, there's a section titled Research. Take a moment to review the research section of the Explanation of Strands document. What connections can you make between the information in the Explanation of Strands document and our reading and discussions so far today? As you read the research section of this document, you may have noticed opportunities for questioning, making connections, participating in reflective activities, communicating understanding through both oral and written communications, and connections to all of the overarching expectations. These connections help us understand how research can be seamlessly integrated across all strands of ELA. Now, research is unique within the ELA standards in that it is one standard with 5 separate indicators. Other strands contain multiple standards and indicators, whereas research only contains the one standard. Each indicator within the research standard represents a specific aspect of the research process. So, research 1.1 is investigating and refining knowledge. 1.2, credibility. 1.3, relevance. 1.4, synthesis. And 1.5 is citation. Take a look at the names of each of the indicators. Which do you feel are strengths for students at the middle school level? Which do you feel are areas for improvement? We will explore each indicator further in just a few moments. Before we dive too deeply into the grade level indicators, I want to make sure we have a moment to look at the support document resource for research that has been developed. So if you look at number 4 on your note catcher, you'll see a link to the research support document. Take a moment to explore this resource and engage in some connection making. What is included in the resource? What are some areas of strength and areas for growth for your students or for the teachers and students that you serve? And consider how you might use this resource to support planning and instruction. So as we look at our resource support document, we notice that included in the document are types of questioning, information on evaluating sources and citing sources, support for refining the scope of inquiry. There's list of terms and definitions, as well as potential grade level expectations. We also consider many ways that teachers or coaches, support staff can use this document. They can use it to align instruction to standards. The document provides detailed guidance on how to integrate research into ELA instruction, which helps teachers align their lessons with the specific standards and expectations for each grade level. Teachers can also use the document to pinpoint essential research skills that students need to develop, such as evaluating sources, synthesizing information, and constructing evidence-based arguments, and then plan lessons that target those skills. The document outlines effective strategies and resources for teaching research, allowing teachers to adopt best practices in their classrooms, such as collaborative research projects, inquiry-based learning, and using various digital tools. It also assists with the differentiation of instruction. Teachers can use the document to plan differentiated lessons that meet the needs of diverse learners, ensuring that all students engage with research at their appropriate skill levels and receive the support they need. And finally, it can allow teachers to progress monitor and assess learning. So the document provides guidance on how to assess students' research skills and track their growth, helping teachers adjust instruction and provide targeted interventions when necessary. So that gives us an overview of what research is in general and the support documents that we have available for the research strand. So take everything that we have discussed so far, and on box 5, turn that into one most important thing. Based on what you have explored and discussed, what is one statement that connects all that information together into one succinct statement and really captures the most important thing you are taking away from section 1? Okay, let's hop into exploring expectations. So what do the ELA standards say specifically for grades 6 through 8 and research? So we're going to use the vertical progression document to really dive into the grade level expectations for written and oral communications. This is located in your note catcher on box 6. The vertical progression for research is unique in that it contains the 5 indicators for each grade level before progressing to the next grade. So you see all of English 4 indicators clustered together, followed by English 3, by English 2, and then it gets into 8, 7, 6, and so on. So each K through English 4 progression for each standard and indicator is in there. And one thing that you can notice about any vertical progression that we have in the standards document is that new content or skills are in bold. So if you look at the screenshot that is on the slide right now, very bottom, English 2, Research 1.4, audience is bold. So that means that that grade level is the first time students are asked to organize findings as relevant to the audience. So anytime you see something in bold, note that it is brand new. We're going to take a moment to really deconstruct the skills and content for each grade, grades 6 through 8. This will provide us an opportunity to address patterns and consider next steps for instruction. We are going to walk through the 5th grade indicator as an example. So what you see on the screen are the expectations for grade 5 for research. It includes the indicators for 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, and 1.5. So when we deconstruct indicators, we always want to make sure that the first thing we do is identify the skills and the content that are expected in each indicator. So if we look through these 5 indicators, we notice that students are asked to conduct short research, generate questions about a topic, consult a variety of print and multimedia sources, determine credibility of those resources in order to use the most credible one, group related findings in a logical way, and then cite sources to avoid plagiarism. So those are the expectations. Now, we never want to stop there when we deconstruct indicators. It's easy to say, okay, now I know very concisely what my students are expected to do. Let's move on. But really, we always want to take a moment to look at that information and decide, okay, well, what insights can I glean from this? What patterns, what new learning, what wonderings do I have? And then what are my instructional implications, my next steps? What should I consider when planning for my instruction and my formative assessments in the classroom? So from grade 5, some insights might be that it said short research. Now, later on in the indicators, it does say short and more sustained. So we need to really keep that length scale in mind. It also says that students are generating questions, so they're creating their own questions. Multimedia sources, that was bold in the vertical articulation, so that's new to 5th grade and something I'm going to have to introduce as a 5th grade teacher. Also noticed determining credibility and relevance. So these considerations are what I have considered to be my instructional implications. Research in grade 5 doesn't have to be a full research project or paper every time or even at all. It's probably going to be important for me to review the glossary and the research support document for the definitions of terms that are listed. I want to introduce students to a variety of multimedia sources and how to determine their credibility, because that is the first time they will be engaging with those sources. And then the focus really is still on generating appropriate questions rather than answering those questions. And taking these considerations and insights based off the deconstruction of the indicator will really help me focus and narrow my instructional planning. So now it's your turn to deconstruct indicators for research. So take a moment, look at box 7 on your note catcher, choose one grade level, and take a moment to read the indicators for that grade level, and then break down the skills and content and provide insights and considerations. Okay, so we're going to go over just a couple of the findings that we had, or the insights, the instructional implications we came up with for each grade. So for grade 6, brand new to grade 6 is refining the scope of inquiry as relevant to the topic. And then you'll notice that now we have short and more sustained research. Grade 7 adds refining the scope of inquiry as relevant to the purpose. Grade 8 has several changes. You'll notice that there is an increase in rigor where we are analyzing the credibility and the relevance of sources. We are now analyzing findings to determine relevance to the topic. And then an additional brand new concept is logically organizing findings as relevant to the purpose. All right, so that was a quick look at some of those grade level expectations, and now we are going to put these expectations into action through instructional practices. So as we talk about instruction, it is important to remember that our instruction should align to the intent of grade level indicators. This instruction then helps us to determine how we will formatively assess our students' learning. This process is iterative. We may use the formative assessment or feedback to determine which indicators need to be revisited or which instructional strategies may need to be adapted to support our learners. And this alignment of thinking indicator, instruction, formative assessment, all being linked to one another, will help guide our work through the next section. It is important to remember that research does not exist in isolation from other standards. Rather, it is an opportunity to intentionally bundle indicators. So let's look at the example on the screen with the overall research standard next to the overall standard for informative expository writing. How do these two standards connect to and support one another? How might we bundle them together in instruction? So the two standards connect and support one another in many ways, including research-driven writing. Research 1 focuses on the skills needed to investigate, evaluate, and synthesize a variety of sources, which provides the foundational research and information needed for Communications 2. In order to effectively write informative or expository text that analyze and explain complex ideas, students must first gather and critically assess information from various sources. Research 1 also emphasizes critical thinking by evaluating sources and refining knowledge, which directly supports the ability to explain and analyze complex ideas in writing. The process of synthesizing information through research helps students organize their thoughts and present them clearly in informative text. Both standards focus on developing students' ability to communicate complex ideas. Communications 2 requires students to write clearly and coherently about the information they have investigated, while research helps students refine and evaluate their understanding, ensuring the content they write is well supported and accurate. So together, these standards foster a cycle of research, analysis, and writing that helps students think critically, gather reliable information, and present findings effectively. Now, how about the overall standard for research next to the overall communication standard for communicating ideas, which is C.7? Where might there be an opportunity to bundle here? There are many ways that these two standards connect and support one another, including research-driven communication. Research involves using critical thinking to investigate, evaluate, and synthesize a variety of sources, which equip students with the knowledge they need. Communication 7 then focuses on how to organize and communicate that knowledge in various formats to engage different audiences. The critical thinking and the synthesis skills from research provide the content and depth necessary for effectively communicating ideas through diverse formats, whether written, oral, or multimedia. Communication 7 also emphasizes organizing and presenting ideas in ways that engage different audiences. The research and evaluation processes in Research 1 help students tailor their communication by ensuring they use relevant, credible, and appropriately synthesized information, making their message more engaging and relevant to the intended audience. Finally, Communication 7 requires students to express their ideas in a range of formats such as essays, presentations, digital media, and research helps students refine and gather diverse sources of information. The process of investigating and synthesizing different sources allows students to adapt their findings to various communication formats and styles, ensuring clarity and impact across different platforms. So together, these two standards can work in tandem to guide students through the process of gathering and refining information and then effectively organizing and presenting that information in a way that is engaging and appropriate for different audiences. So let's look at one more and really get down at a granular level with 7th grade. So we're going to take a look at the indicator expectations for Research 1.3, which is relevance, and C.9, evaluating ideas in 7th grade. How might opportunities present themselves to intentionally bundle these indicators for instruction as a 7th grade teacher? So again, you may notice that there are several connections or ways that these two indicators can support one another. Research 1.3 for 7th grade focuses on determining which sources and information are relevant to the topic, which is foundational for Communications 9 in 7th grade. When evaluating a speaker's argument or analyzing a presentation, students need to assess the relevance of evidence and claims presented. The skills in the research indicator help students determine whether information provided in a presentation is pertinent to the argument being made. In addition, Communications 9 for 7th grade requires students to analyze a presentation's effectiveness by considering how well the speaker articulates their message, uses media, and selects appropriate evidence. Research 1.3 for 7th grade supports this by teaching students to critically evaluate sources for their relevance to the topic. This critical evaluation is essential for understanding how effectively a speaker uses information and media to communicate their message and support their claims. Finally, in Communications 9 for 7th grade, students analyze how a speaker uses different media to enhance their message for the audience. The 7th grade Research 1.3 indicator helps students understand which sources of information are most appropriate and relevant for the speaker to use. This ensures that when students evaluate a speaker's use of media, they can also assess whether the information is well chosen and aligns with the purpose and audience of the presentation. Together, these standards support students in evaluating and understanding how effective speakers use relevant information and media to craft persuasive messages, while also honing the skills needed to determine the relevance of sources when researching and analyzing a topic. So, why does this matter? Take a moment to read this excerpt from the explanation of strands. The explanation of strands makes it clear that the intent of our ELA standards is not to teach them in isolation, but to group and intentionally teach indicators based on need and relevance. In other words, not all indicators require a separate lesson, activity, or resource. Purposeful planning on the part of the teacher can yield effective and efficient results. If you have attended our previous sessions on written and oral communications, you know that we often like to present learning experiences in the form of micros, minis, and macros. That is, learning experiences that range in complexity, length, and depth. A micro experience is one that we define as less than one class period. It could be as short as even 5 to 10 minutes. A mini experience would be 1 to 2 class periods, and a macro experience would be those culminating experiences. So when we think about research, you may often think of a full research project or perhaps an essay. While some indicators can be explored through a micro experience, the bundling of multiple indicators may be explored in a culminating experience. It's important to remember that the research standards address short and more sustained research experiences. Not all research has to end in a large-scale research project, as noted in the explanation of strands you read at the beginning of today's session. On your note catcher on box 9, you have a link to a research resource folder. In that folder are examples of micro, mini, and macro experiences for each of the middle level grade levels, as well as a micro, mini, macro master list that we've included for reference that houses all other micro, mini, and macro experiences that we have created for previous PD sessions. What I'd like you to do now is take some time to explore the resources based on your own interest as well as any goals you may have for instruction or support. Think through the lens of USA. What might you be able to immediately use in your planning or instruction? What resource could you potentially share with a colleague? And what resource could you adapt to align with your grade level or instruction? Now we're going to take some of the resources that we've just reviewed and integrate them into lessons provided by some of the high quality instructional materials that have been adopted across our state. So on your note catcher box 10, you will see several integration documents. There's one for each grade 6th, 7th, and 8th. Choose the grade level that you would like to explore. When you open that document, you'll notice that there are several sample lessons provided. Now, these sample lessons are from one of the state-adopted HQIM in our state. Some of the lesson examples are very naturally aligned to research or may be research lessons, while some of them are not related to research in any way. Your job will be to break down the content and skills associated with that sample lesson. So what was the intent of the original lesson? Then choose a research indicator for that grade level that could be integrated into the lesson seamlessly. And finally, go back to your micro, mini, macro folders and choose a resource that would enhance this lesson and allow students to practice their research skills. Now remember, these lessons are examples, not necessarily exemplars. It's just an opportunity for us to start practicing how to use our high quality instructional materials with integrity by integrating what we know are the expectations for our grade level indicators. Now that you've had time to practice, we are going to wrap up our webinar today with clarity and closure using the triangle, circle, square reflection. So the first thing I want you to think about are three important ideas that you can take away from this session. Then consider what's still circling in your head. What are you still trying to understand? And finally, what's something that squares or matches up with your thinking or values? Finally, one last look at today's purpose. That was to understand content and rigor expectations of research for middle school students in order to develop and provide standards-based instruction using high-quality instructional materials and evidence-based practices. Review your notes from box 1 of your note catcher. Did your initial interpretation of the purpose match the end result of our webinar? I certainly hope that those expectations were met and that you felt our time together to be purposeful and engaging. We look forward to working with you again soon on another aspect of our 2024 SC CCR ELA standards.